Hello, and welcome to the Science of Psychotherapy Conversations. I'm Richard Hill, and today I'll be talking to Ana Gomez. She's in Phoenix in the USA, and she does wonderful, wonderful work with EMDR and also Sandtray therapy and these experiential frames. And she's got a great new book out called EMDR-Sandtray-based Therapy, which is the healing of complex trauma and dissociation across the lifespan. And it is just one of many books she's done. And we'll talk about some of the others. She's got an incredible textbook, a handbook of complex traumas and things with wonderful authors involved. We'll have a little look at that as well as working with kids a lot and really getting into this understanding of how Sandtray work, of how this experiential, this working with the explicit but also the implicit world is all about. So let's travel off now to Phoenix in Arizona and talk to Ana Gomez. So welcome, Ana Gomez, to the Conversations, Science of Psychotherapy podcast. We really appreciate you giving us your time. But I was drawn and I wanted to talk to you very much about your new book. I know you've got many others. We'll talk about those as well. But the new book, EMDR-Sandtray-based Therapy, and Norton's have brought that out. So that's a fabulous one. Everyone must go and have a look at it. But we'll want to talk about that. We'll want to talk about your institute, the teaching you do. There's fascinating things about kids that you do. But I've had a bit of a look-see into your background. I guess the listeners don't know too much. Can we do a little bit of the Ana Gomez story? You know, how the potted version up to now.
Yeah, well, I can start since I was a very curious child that drove my mother crazy and my father with lots of questions. And here I am, when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a philosopher, but most people thought, what are you going to do as a philosopher? And I remember saying, I want to be a thinker. And then went for psychology. And here I am. I've been in practice for close to 30 years, working especially with very complex clinical presentations, developmental trauma, complex trauma, dissociation. That has been the core of my work. And at some point, I had a heart calling of starting to write. So I wrote my first book. It's a clinical book for clinicians and therapists on EMDR and adjunct approaches, specifically for children. I have worked throughout my close to 30 years of practice with clients across development, but I'm very focused on the children and adolescents and the books that I have written for clinicians and also for children are focused on that population. And so my first book was published in 2013, and I published multiple children's books to explain not only EMDR therapy, but also increase emotional literacy, help children understand systems of self-protection that very much are connected to complex trauma and dissociation. And this year, yeah, it's been busy. Two books have been
Yes,
released.
you got two books now. I know that you happen to have them just sitting on your desk there. So I
Yeah,
know I'd love to show them. So let me have a look. Let's look at the one in March. Now this is
yeah.
this
So
is a
this one is
mammoth
quite
piece of
heavy.
work. That's amazing.
It is quite heavy. Yes, I
Ah,
hurt my arm the other day trying to lift it. So
yeah.
this is the Handbook of Complex Trauma and Dissociation that I co-edited with Jill Hosey, and it has about 47 chapters with over 60 contributors where we address everything you can think of in terms of complex trauma and dissociation in children, probably the largest volume that exists in the subject.
That's
And
wonderful.
this,
And the current one that's about now, here it comes.
yeah,
EMDR.
this one
Yeah.
is coming out in just 4 days.
Yeah.
This is dedicated to the union of EMDR therapy and Sandtray therapy.
Yeah, and And I mean, I've been a great advocate for integration and so on, but I've been calling it more and more reintegration, the reunion, because like all good investigators of anything, we've investigated different things that the human persona, that the human behavior patterns do. And we've looked at them and investigated them. And I love the chaos theory guy, Prigogine. He said we differentiate the elements to find their greater richness, so that when we put them back into the system, there's a greater system. And
Mhm.
your work's got a lot. There's a lot in your frame. What I suppose we would call those experiential things, and working with kids and teenagers. I mean, the sensory motor. You've done work in play therapy, one's in Sandtray, EMDR, interpersonal neurobiology. All these things of looking for the humanity. That's what really is the takeaway that I got from a quick look, and then teaching it, because
Mhm.
this humanity, a sense of our own humanness,
Mhm.
isn't really a big thing on the education. It's not a part of the three R's. And this
Mhm.
work with children, let's have a little look at that, if that's okay. This work and
Mhm.
these books, and you've got a few books. There's what's your favourite one, and just give a bit of a roundup on those, because I love that work with children.
Richard, this is like asking a parent what's your favorite
Oh yes,
show.
I know. Okay, what's the most recent one? I know, that's
Yeah,
terrible. I know.
the EMDR
Yeah,
Sandtray is
yeah,
the most recent, but I think in basically all my work in the books that I have published, with the exception of the handbook, which really addresses complex trauma and dissociation in children, and we bring up multiple approaches. But even with EMDR, what I have proposed is a multimodal approach that is integrative and that brings interpersonal neurobiology, polyvagal theory, that brings other modalities like somatic therapies. I was also trained by Pat Ogden and
yeah,
co-author a chapter with her because again, I believe that the human mind is incredibly complex and there are
mm,
multiple portals into the embodied mind and multiple possibilities. The EMDR Sandtray is one of them, is one portal to enter the embodied mind. And at the same time, what we have in many of these books is an emphasis on mentalization, the capacity of the clinician to resonate with the child, the adolescent, the adult that they have in front of them, their capacity to create a shared coherence, connection. Because in the moments of deep vulnerability, which I have experienced them myself as I received my own therapy, I tried everything on my best lab in those moments of reaching deep layers of self, there is a great deal of vulnerability, and you need the other right there. That's what offers the greatest possibility for repair when you have the other. So, yes, the therapeutic relationship, the awareness, the connection of the therapist to themselves, and the capacity to resonate with the other to be a human in front of your client. Even if you're using all the theories, you can be full of theories, knowledge, and yet you have to have that empty space to be able to receive and resonate with the client that you have in front of you.
yes, that curiosity, and preparedness to be surprised by what they come up with. My mentor Ernest Rossi would quite often say to clients when they said something or realized something, he would say, "What kind of genius would I have been to have thought of that?" Uh,
Mhm.
and uh, I've experienced that many times myself. But we look here at the EMDR, which is a method, a way that enables the intensity of the distress that is held from traumas to be relieved, and also Sandtray, which allows the expression of of what is going on in metaphor and visual forms. So
Mhm.
this sense of being held in, compressed, unresolved, this way of working, and with children particularly, what do you find are some of the things that they most need, that they know they need, and I guess also those things that they need that they don't know they need, and that's why we need to work
Yeah.
interpersonally.
Right, absolutely. And so EMDR therapy is a very potent, powerful approach with robust research and scientific support. And Sandtray therapy is also a very powerful approach. But in my experience, when you bring them together, they potentiate one another because the Sandtray gives EMDR many, many gifts. One is that it really embraces the bihemispheric structure of the brain, given the mind another portal into self and into memories and into identity as well. And the symbol becomes a bridge between implicit and explicit memory. Sometimes we may select a symbol, a figure, and don't know exactly what meaning is attached to it. And later on, there is a connection into the neocortex. Now there is a knowledge and understanding of what it means. So specifically for children, the implicit access utilizing the sand tray is incredibly powerful because the child may create a story of a little kitty that was abandoned. Not me. It's not my pain, not my grief. It's not self. But I'm able as a child to still work through the sense of abandonment from the distance, from the zebra, from the little kitty that feels sad and alone and abandoned. And these figures, the characters, become avatars for the mind because now the mind can express what otherwise will be utterly overwhelming. And so through the characters and through the avatars, the mind can express itself. And on top of it, the sand tray serves as a mirror of the mind because now the mind can dialogue with itself. And the symbol also becomes a refuge and an avatar through which the mind can experience completions. For example, I may have or the child may have a character that is running successfully or fighting successfully the perpetrator. And even though it's not the child or the child's mind doesn't yet recognize that zebra as self, can receive the offerings of that experience, can receive the completion, that nervous system of the child can experience the completion of that truncated response, that fight response that could not be executed during the traumatic event. So there are so many gifts and so many opportunities for the mind to find itself through the work in the sand tray.
Yeah, it's so interesting watching it play out with different people, and so differently each time. As you say, sometimes you get lost just in the metaphors and in the symbols and in the almost. I know Ernie and I would talk about this observer operator, but I experienced that as an actor. I could be acting, I could be working with something. And up here, I've still got Richard Hill sort of going, oh, look at that. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know what that's about, but uh, so that playing with kids, what sort of is the framework of the freedoms that they get? I mean, you've alluded to it a little bit. Is there any more you can talk about that of the how interested they get in these stories, or how these stories cease to become painful? Just those different aspects. Because I've seen kids get quite into it, and they're
Yeah,
actually telling about a terrible story about themselves, but it
yeah.
doesn't. It's what are the elements that allow it to be so not re-traumatizing and not
Traumatizing.
damaging and so on and so forth.
Right. It's a primary, the distance that it offers, where the mind doesn't have to own it yet. It's not me. It's not my abandonment, my sadness, my grief. And because the child can interact with the states without the ownership. That level of distance allows for the child to express what otherwise will be overwhelming. In addition to that, when you work with children, they don't come in and give you their life stories in well-formed verbal narratives. That just doesn't happen. And generally speaking, even adolescents and adults, they can be physiologically activated, and we know that can be also verbally inhibited because there are regions of the brain in charge of language that shut down or are inhibited when they are physiologically activated because of recalling the traumatic event. So I think we are so fixated on verbal narratives and talk therapy that we have abandoned, even adult therapists, which I am an adult therapist as well. I have worked with adults. We have abandoned the richness of movement, the richness of the symbol, the richness of play. And so when they are, whether they are creating a story in the Sandtray about some character, or they actually blend in the Sandtray the stories of trauma, it's powerful now to unblend it. In every session, they end it, they dismantle or we dismantle, or the therapist dismantles the Sandtray, and they come back and create another one. That process, Richard, I can't tell you how powerful it is because it really challenges the idea that these memories are permanent. And let me say this. So clients, especially with complex trauma, they live in trauma time, which means that in the present, when they get activated by a minor stimulus, and this is from Shapiro, now they see and experience the present through the lenses, and I will add autonomic states formed in the past. So when you dismantle, when you end the story every session and create it again, it's like death and birth, right? And you challenge the permanence of that experience that is really in the past and the existence, right, as a permanent entity in the life and in the embodied mind of the client. Quite powerful.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and shifting that what I call the energetic potency is a term. I don't know. I'm just trying to find a term that gives a feeling of it. But the story holds all the potency, and this, of course, is the same thing. Milton Erickson used to say, the task of the therapist is to return. He called it the burden of responsibility because he was an old farm boy, but to return that energetic potency to the client, to the child, to the therapeutic experience. That's an incredibly powerful, simple, experiential metaphor for I can actually turn this story on and off. And it's quite extraordinary. I was thinking as we were doing that also in relation to your training programs, because we've got these things and understanding how to work with the kids and giving the kids these frameworks of openness. But then, as you say, as trained therapists, we get sort of a bit imbued with theories and methodologies and perhaps a little bit too much talk. You do training. What are the exciting things that happen for you as a trainer and for therapists coming in from a more staid world into this more expressive, outgoing? What's that like for people who come to your college, your institute?
Yeah, it's quite an experience, I have to say. And for some, they come in because they have already experienced the power either of EMDR or Sandtray, and they're ready to bring the two together. The trainings are highly experiential, so they practice. They have to have their Sandtrays, or if we do the trainings in person, I have 4,000 figures. I have a little bit more because that's one thing that happens to us Sandtray therapists. We become addicted to buying figures, and we never believe that we have enough. So we keep buying and buying. But during the training, we also emphasize presence. We emphasize curiosity and how we can cultivate that space of connection to ourselves. So we start every training with exercises to travel back into ourselves because in connection to ourselves, we can receive information about what's happening for our clients and for ourselves, mentalization, mindset, holding the mind of the other in mind while holding our mind in mind, which I think is so powerful. We encourage our students also to do their own work. I think it's fundamental that the individual, the person, the therapist delivering EMDR-Sandtray or EMDR or any therapeutic approach, it is important that we have traveled into ourselves. That process is enriching, expands our field of consciousness and our field of awareness. So we emphasize that. And then we go through so many possibilities that the two can offer because in the sand tray, there are so many different levels and portals to access memories, to access meta perceptions, to access affect and emotions, to access somatic intelligence. Sometimes we can go from object and symbol to self. For example, we can inquire about how is it as you look at the tiger, what happens for you? And what's happening in your inner world, interoceptive awareness, and coming back to see how the what is unfolding in the sand tray is activating or making contact with the nervous system. And we do this with clients across development. So there are so many different levels of work and titration that we use. There are clients that may access the memories of trauma implicitly, and some that go through the explicit portal where the trauma is right there. We use all kinds of things, creative things, from coverings, and covering things are to activating, titrating, co-regulating in the sand tray and work, and becoming that external psychobiological regulator, to use Alan Short's words, of the client, to be a companion, to be a witness, to support the unblending of polarizations. The mind that has been impacted, especially by chronic trauma, is a mind that moves into polarizations. I love, I hate. And bringing into the sand tray these polarities, not for me as a clinician to change it. It's not my job to do so. My job is to bring this into the field of consciousness and field of awareness so the mind can begin to embrace it.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of work that is done. We have a program that is 90 hours. So the first level is 45 hours. So we really dive into trauma, then we go into complex trauma, dissociation, how to work with a compartmentalized system and dissociative parts. The sand tray is such a beautiful refuge and a contained space for dissociative parts to show up.
Mm.
Sometimes without names first, but it's a playground for them that can just be more regulated without having to activate the system so much. We can explore inner dynamics and the relational choreographies between all this, the inner system, the inner dissociative matrix. So the possibilities are extensive, Richard.
Yeah, and it's extraordinary what becomes apparent. You know,
Mhm.
these sort of things you say. Someone puts these ostensibly dissociated elements, but when they put them in a single field,
Mhm.
it gives them the opportunity to discover or create or do these reassociations. And one of the things that I find very interesting, I'd love to get your thoughts on it, is that sometimes the resolutions are quite cognitively describable, quite I can see and I understand and things. But other
Mhm.
times there's I've seen examples of people going, well, I'm not quite sure what happened. I can't really describe it, but I feel much better. Or, the issue was no longer disturbing me. So it's more of a purely implicit sort of
Mm-hmm.
reorganization, and it's almost like a cognitive description would be either sort of just wasting time. Like it's great, that's solved, get on. What's your thoughts about those sorts of explicit and implicit framings that people have?
I think that part of what we do is to support the client in changing relational templates with others and self,
Mm,
and beginning to trust self and trusting that the movement between implicit and explicit memory is not linear, but instead think about it as a continuum that moves like a pendulum and goes slowly or quite fast. There are moments where the insight and the cognitive awareness shows up so quickly, but there are times that the rhythm is quite slow. It takes time for the information to penetrate the walls that were created in the service of survival. And we
mm,
honor that and we respect all the systems of self-protection that were created for safety and survival and honor those rhythms. It's not about my agenda. It's about, again, joining in the rhythm of the clients. Now, these rhythms can shift moment to moment and session to session. So we accommodate to the rhythms and supporting the client and knowing that when the information needs to be known, it will show up in the way
mm,
that they need, beginning
mm,
to trust self. In that when the information is ready to be witnessed, this is one of the things we say in Sandtray, the witnessing process. I am a witness for them, and they are a witness of their own story, their own mind. And when the the information is ready to be witnessed, it will show up in the way that they need. But sometimes it needs to remain there. Let's
mm,
trust the wisdom of the mind. That is foreign for some clients where there is
mm,
no trust, especially for self. But we organize the delivery of EMDR-Sandtray in a way that promotes corrective experiences of safety and trust, reconnecting the clients to the anchors of social engagement and the
mm.
anchors of connection to self and trust and compassion for self,
Ye-
right?
Yeah, I mean, it just reminds me of a little bit of my own just sort of experience of in my 30s going, oh, is that what mum meant? It was sort of, and and that sort of thing that as you speak, I was thinking, well, there was stuff that she said to me that I trusted, uh, and following that was very good for my life, but
Mhm,
actually the timing for it all to gel into sort of
mhm,
a philosophical awareness or something
mhm.
was a bit later, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's so it's. I'm just thinking. My son one time, he did something, and I said, "I've been telling you that for years," and he said, "Oh yeah, I listened, Dad, but it's only relevant now." So this is actually by those reflections, those little reflections of mine, it just highlights how natural it is, and how we become denaturalized or desensitized to just these simple processes of being patient, of allowing
Yeah.
things, and that really important thing you just said there of trusting something because because it helps, because it makes me feel better,
Mhm. Yeah.
and being less fussed. And this is something that is problematic in this very academic, um, I need to be able to write it down and pass an exam type of mentality. Does that
Mhm.
become more frustrating or more interfering as the clients get older, and perhaps as the therapists get older? What's that sort of interference pattern that the world sets up, that external frame?
Yeah, and sometimes we have to help clients by wondering and curiosity, how is it for you not to have the answer? Because there's data there too. There is information, important information, in terms of how the mind of the client has been shaped by experience. But coming back to your point, yes, we live in a society of doing and we forgot what is to be. And that process, this is a process of becoming, but more than that is a process of unbecoming. And in that process, there are going to be moments of feeling uncomfortable with being. And we accompany, we prepare the client for that. And those moments of ambiguity, moments of feeling quite uncomfortable, moments of unknown, those are very rich moments in psychotherapy to be with, to teach the client to be in companionship, because now we are the external regulators, the companions, the witnesses can say, it feels uncomfortable. I can say, I'm with you in this moment. I'm sitting with this moment of feeling quite uncomfortable. Can we slow it down a bit? Is there a figure? Is there a symbol that can accompany you through this emotion, this feeling? We also titrate, especially with children. We have all kinds of things. We have measuring spoons, we have sprays, we have droppers, because then we can titrate. We can say, if this feeling uncomfortable is too big, how much of it can we sit with? Just a bit, maybe 2 drops, maybe a spoon. And then companionship, I'm with you. Let's dive with it. We use somatic, invite somatic intelligence. How does that resonate with you if it has movement? How would this uncomfortable feeling move? If it had texture, what would it be like? Can we move with it?
Mm-hmm.
So we can embrace sensory systems. We can embrace that moment that feels quite uncomfortable, because those moments offer incredible opportunities for integration and for, coming back, traveling back to ourselves.
Well, just beautiful examples. I was just thinking, I should ask you about some examples of things that you do, which of course you then just went and did. You read my mind. Uh, but it is that fascinating thing, that pressure, the pressure that seems to exist in only talk therapy frames, where people that this pressure to be able to verbalize what they're doing, and they're all that wonderful access, or using that example of the titrating, of I don't have to say, oh well. I've got an 8 and I could do it as a 4. You can actually just physicalize, and the body gives the body the opportunity. I mean, as they put the drops in, there's a point at which the body will, what we call it, an ideomotor response. The body will go, oh, that's enough.
Yeah, yeah.
So that really, sort of resonated. Really, I was going, wow, that's fantastic. But just in doing some of those, we said bibs and bobs, maybe just a little for the benefit of sort of a invented case study of someone that comes in with an issue, they start working with the tray. Is there a sort of a little bit of something, maybe example taken from the book of the sorts of process that enables the timing of the EMDR to come in relation to the Sandtray, because that's that interplay. Can we just sort of describe that and give it again, like you were doing in those other examples, what it's like for the actual participant?
Yeah. And let me say just a little bit more about how in EMDR Sandtray, I'm not utilizing sandplay, which I have great respect. Sandplay is a psychoanalytic approach to sand work. Sandtray therapy embraces multiple approaches.
Right.
And in such, we do invite the voices of the left brain. So we go into the symbol, and when the mind is ready to bring words to it, they do come. And there is a narrative that begins to emerge from the nonverbal symbol-based narratives. So there is an invitation for verbalizations, and that may be different from client to client. Some clients are verbal, very verbal, of all ages right away, while some others need to be right there with the story without any verbalizations. But stories, there are so many different stories. I can give you kind of a generic story where, let's
Hmm.
say, a child comes in with a lot of aggressiveness and aggression. Usually, a lot of clients with developmental trauma, complex trauma, they come in and I'm like the sixth therapist, and the symptoms persist. And for some of these children, they again come in and they're not really able to verbalize what's happening for them. So we began with a basket and all the figures, and we invite them just pick the figures that you're drawn to.
Ah.
We go into implicit access. So don't pick, don't, we're not creating a story yet. Just pick the ones that somehow you feel very drawn to, that they're appealing to you. So they bring their figures, and then we invite them to create a world in any way they want. Anything can happen in the tray. We set up a few boundaries around it. And then once the story, the sand world is created, then we go into the witnessing process. You know, what would you like me to know? What do you want to tell me about this? Well, this is a story of a dragon that is killing everyone, or this is a story of a kitty that is alone, or this is the story of the lizard that is angry because the lizard lost his family. And what you began to see is how this is an incredible process, but how a lot of the sand worlds that they create, they have so many elements of their suffering, their trauma, their adversity, what the mind is really focused on and trying to heal. And we began the process of working with it. So in EMDR therapy, we have 8 phases. So we go through the phases. In phase 1, we gather history. So we are very, very curious about what's happening. We wonder about what's happening here, what's happening here. You may see victim perpetrator dynamics, for example. You may see parent child relationship dynamics. You began to see the nervous system right there in the tray. You may see children that come in and teenagers and adults that create worlds where they're fighting all the time, battles, wars. You see that sympathetic system very much in this entree. You may have clients that come in and put one figure is lonely, no people. And you began to feel the forces of the dorsal vagal system as well. And you also see resources that emerge in the tray, a helper, someone that has a different perspective of what is happening, a rescuer, a friend, a family member. You see this adaptive resources that began to surface. We also do joined trays with parents because it's a
Hmm.
great um, space to explore relational dynamics. We see motivational systems in the sand tray as well. We see the attachment system. We began to see the caregiving system, parents that are available, the mother zebra that comes in and takes care of the baby zebra, or no, the zebra is alone, no parents, absent caregivers or abusive caregivers. So the stories that the child's creating is the stories are giving you information about the functioning of the caregiving system. And you also bring the parents and they co-create sand worlds together. And you began to see the relational choreographies and the relational dynamics that exist between the parent and the child. You began to see the relational ecosystem of this child to emerge in the sand tray. And I
Hmm.
have done join trays between partners that are coming to therapy. And I have a lot of clinicians that have been trained in EMDR-Sandtray that they use it with couples. They co-create
Hmm.
stories in the sand tray, and they learn a lot about their relational dynamics and where they learn to relate that way. So much can be done.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful little run through, and you've got this. So there were eight in the book. You sort of actually delineate those into eight sort of functional steps that people can get a grasp of. So that's a wonderful resource for for getting a grip, because I can see this, the necessity for the therapist to to have an understanding. It was interesting. I just brought to mind a thing of Steven Pinker, and he was talking about intuitive and counterintuitive thinking, and he said the interesting thing is the more I know, the less counterintuitive my thinking becomes. So this persistent engagement with awareness. Uh, Seeing stories from a therapist's point of view, seeing the stories of things played out in life. I mean, becoming
Mhm,
more observant as a taking on being a therapist as a lifestyle, as different from just something that you do for 60 minutes. That
mhm,
sounds to be something that's terribly important. Uh,
mhm,
I mean, I was just thinking of being down um, in the literally in the sand pit at the local play park with my grandchildren, and
mhm,
uh, and there I was, and there were four or five others, and I'm just thinking back to it, and I'm going, yeah, there were lots of stories being played out in this
mhm,
in this little park. Lots of things said and done, and children
mhm,
displaying through the available toys
mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
what
Mhm,
what brings them into community. So
mhm,
the the difficulty is this one that you sort of hinted at before, that there's sometimes for some people quite a journey through things that aren't successful, that don't have a
mhm,
positive change. Like suddenly you come in there and say, am I your first therapist? And they say, no, you're like my 10th or my sixth, I think you said. And uh, what can I ask you for just some of your thoughts of the um, of this difficulty that you face with children who've come in, I guess, with a series of disappointments in
mhm,
under their belt, which is in itself not a major trauma, but it's a traumatic amplifier.
mhm. Yeah. And many of these children were receiving other forms of therapy, not necessarily EMDR-Sandtray. But
Mm,
yeah, it actually, every therapeutic, what they perceive as a therapeutic failure continues to reinforce the same meta perceptions of defectiveness,
mm,
cannot get better, hopelessness, helplessness, shame. So we do want to support them in the process of healing so they have a sense of an act of triumph, a sense of agency, that it is possible for them to heal. And this is why you were addressing this is it's not just a therapist for 60 minutes or for 50 minutes, but is a life commitment to a profession, is a life
mm,
commitment to also working on myself, because I am also an important tool and an agent of change that I can provide the companionship and the stage for corrective experiences to happen. Lots of repair, lots of work with that sense of hopelessness. And here's what I have seen. I'll give you a very quick example. A child that came in with terrible history of domestic violence and trauma, and parents had very strong addictions, and a child that was moving to foster care. And this is the child that comes in with a lot of rage and anger and creating in the sand a lot of stories about killings and aggression and violence. We started with EMDR-Sandtray, and in EMDR, we go through multiple phases until we get to processing. And what we do in EMDR-Sandtray is that the child does not need to yet acknowledge the traumatic event. We start far away with implicit portals and implicit access. And we started to process this sand world where a lizard was killing others and was abusive and violent. without him yet realizing or fully owning or acknowledging, this is me, this is my anger, this is the violence that I witnessed. We started to see changes. Even from the first session,
Mm,
he started to receive connection from others. That's something that was not happening. Within 2 months, we noticed changes in his behavior at school, greater openness to form relationships with classmates, with teachers. And it took several months for him to one day come in and say, I'm not playing with this lizard anymore, and started to create different stories with people. Still not me, still not mine, still not my abusive parents, but he was getting closer. And then one day, very organically, he comes in and he starts talking about my anger, the
mm,
experience that I had, what I witnessed, and what because I've seen this process as a continuum that goes from implicit into explicit memory, is how this work begins to penetrate those walls of not knowing, not self, not my emotions, and those walls of self-protection that were formed as a result of trauma. But we see changes and shifting in their sleep patterns, in their relational patterns, even without full access to that cognitive mind that can say, oh, is this or it's ABC, I understand. There are there are changes occurring at an implicit level that translate into behaviors as well.
mm. That's just a beautiful description of the breadth of
Mhm.
experiential opportunities and the sorts of things that um, people need to be trained in. They need to understand. They need to learn. We need to delve into it because it's it's not in the usual. It should be. I mean, I can see parallels to this, back to my acting career and various characters and things, but I wouldn't have understood it in the way I needed to understand it if I hadn't had those experiences of additional study, of additional work with. You've worked directly with Francine. I've worked with Francine Shapiro a little bit, and I suppose as we wind up, is there a question I haven't asked? Or if not, is there just a little summary, a little pulling together of the nature to leave people with?
Well, first and foremost, Richard, thank you for inviting me. Thanks for creating this space for me to share about my life work and to share with your audience a little bit about what my mind has been doing and also the contribution of so many, because in this book, uh, really, there are so many people that have contributed, from people that are already passed away, like Francine Shapiro, but many other people that contributed to the field of Sandtray therapy. So I'm standing on all of their shoulders. And that knowledge and wisdom allowed me to write this book and to start the process of creating something new. So I'm just grateful for the space that you have given me.
Well, that's my pleasure, obviously, and my education. I always think that people say, is podcasts, you do learn a lot from podcasts, and I say, well, I do. It's and I'm grateful for your sharing of all that wonderful experience. But now, Anna Gomez, we must say goodbye, and I just want to thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing that book when getting it myself, and everybody interested, and even those who are just curious, get in, learn, find out. There is so much more we don't yet know. So for now, thank you very much.